Hi guys, good morning. So I'm gonna give everybody a few minutes to get settled down. And then we'll start with an introduction and then we'll kind of keep going just like we did yesterday. So for now, you guys could just sit tight, get acquainted, make sure that you could see my screen, that you could hear me well. And I'm just gonna give it until like 8:02-ish for everybody to be here before we start, okay? Hi, everybody. Good morning. I'm just giving people a few minutes to get settled before we start. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and get started. So you guys already know me from yesterday. If anybody's new, I'm just gonna do a quick introduction again. My name is Olga. I'm a third-year medical student. I'm here to teach you guys the Extra Help Hunter course. I'll be with you for the next few days. Yesterday, we started with reading comp. We have a session today, and then we have a session on Monday, which is tomorrow and Tuesday, but those are gonna be in the evening time. I have a lot of experience teaching Hunter. I've been tutoring for many years, and I have a lot of experience in general with standardized exams. So I'm kind of here to go over the lesson plan, but also any questions that you guys have, I'm more than happy to answer. And I can stay at the end for like a Q&A type of thing. You guys can literally ask me anything. I have a lot of experiences, and I just want you guys to feel comfortable and to do well and to learn as much as possible. It's really important, like I said yesterday, that you guys take what I teach you and then you just kind of incorporate it to your own techniques and everything else other tutors teach you. And you keep doing that as you guys go through life and your sort of tutoring journey and your test taking journey, because you can never just fully adopt someone else's strategy. You always have to adapt it towards what it has to, like what's comfortable for you and how your brain works and how you study and how you take tests and how you function. Like I did yesterday, I will be more than happy to send you guys the notes. Just email me at the end of class and I will send it to you. And I'm going to put my email in the chat again, just so everybody has it. If you don't hear back from me, like right after class, you can send me another email. Yesterday for a few students, for some reason, it went to like my spam and I only noticed like in the evening time. So for a bunch of you, I only sent the notes like at like 6, maybe 5 o'clock. I'm usually like I usually send it right after class. So if you're waiting for me and I didn't send it yet, feel free to just email me again and say, hey, I emailed you. I don't have the notes. I don't mind if you email me multiple times, because I know that you guys might be waiting for the notes and I am a student and I was a student. And I know it's annoying to sometimes wait for the notes if you're trying to study something. Okay, so yesterday I mentioned that we would do math, but then I realized that you guys have a separate thing for math extra help. So I was thinking that we could just keep going with reading comprehension because that's what you guys were promised. Is that okay with everybody? Okay, and then we still have a bunch of reading comp to do because we didn't finish test one yesterday. So I was thinking that we would just keep working through test one and we'll work through those passages. And in the last 20 minutes or so, or maybe last half an hour, we'll do note taking. We'll do note taking just like just like yesterday. So I see some people do want math, so maybe we can do like a half session or something like that. Let's start with reading and then maybe around like 9:15 we can do a little bit of math if you guys have specific questions for me. And then in the last few minutes, I still want to take notes. The types of notes that I want to take today is I want to go over like give you guys a note sheet of reading comprehension strategies. So I mentioned like a bunch yesterday as I'm going through it, but I want you guys to have one sheet of notes with the strategies just so you could go back to that and quickly reread that before your exam. And then I also want to go over the different types of multiple choice questions they can ask you, just so you're familiar with that, okay? All right, anybody have any questions for me before we start? No, and then you guys should still have the copy of this test from yesterday. Somebody was really nice and sent it in the chat. We're working still on exam one. Hopefully we get to finish it today. Okay, is everybody ready? All right, so this is going to be largely a review of yesterday. I'm going to be saying a lot of the same things, but I want it to really stick in your head. I want you to be used to thinking all those same things as you're reading the passages on test day. It would be great if you guys heard my voice on test day as soon as you start reading. So it's really resonating in your head. So those ideas are really like right in the forefront of your mind. So again, the reading passages don't usually have titles, so we're kind of ready to jump in and start reading. So we have the first objects that assume a distinct presence before me as I look far back into the blink of my infancy are my mother with her pretty hair and youthful shape, and Peggotty with no shape at all and eyes so dark that they seem to darken their whole neighborhood in her face, and cheeks and arms so hard and red that I wondered the birds didn't peck her in preference to apples. Okay, so in paragraph one thing that you guys should notice right away is point of view. And I'm using personal pronouns, right? I see personal pronouns. This is something that I went over with you guys yesterday. I see pronouns like I see pronouns like my. So I know that this story is being told for me from the narrator's point of view. This is a personal story. Somebody's telling me about their life, personal. So right away, that's something that I need to point out in my head. If you need to write it down, you write it down. So first person. And that tells me that this is a narrative. Second of all, I'm introduced to a few characters, right? So I obviously have the narrator who's telling me their story. That's one character. But now I'm also introduced to the narrator's mom. And I'm also introduced to whoever Peggotty is. And for the mom, it seems like the author is describing her with positive words, right? So we talked about connotations yesterday. And you notice we say pretty hair and youthful shape. So both of those are more or less positive descriptions, right? But Peggotty, we don't know how the author really feels about Peggotty yet. No shape at all, and eyes so dark that they seem to darken their whole neighborhood in her face, and cheeks and arms so hard and red that I wondered the birds didn't peck her in preference to apples. So obviously, mom is pretty and youthful, and then this Peggotty character has really dark eyes that's darkening her whole face. She has hard cheeks, hard arms, and the narrator is wondering why birds didn't peck her. So the perspective of Peggotty seems a little bit less positive if we're thinking about connotation and tone. Okay, so that's everything that should be going through your head as you read the first paragraph. Um, and if you want to do a better job annotating, you could do something like mother and write like a positive symbol here, and Peggotty and write some negative symbol here, if you need that extra reminder. But it's still something that you should be thinking about, even if you don't choose to write it. And if you wanted to give yourself a quick summary, you could also say like Peggotty, negative, mom, positive, first person perspective. You don't need to use full words. You don't need to like give yourself a full roadmap. Whatever it is that's enough for you to look back on it and remember what you meant by it. Does that make sense? Yeah, thanks guys for being so responsive in the chat. This is the real released Hunter test 1. Somebody sent a PDF. Okay, so let's keep reading. I believe I can remember these two at a little distance apart, dwarfed to my sight by stooping down or kneeling on the floor, and I going unsteadily from the one to the other. I have an impression on my mind which I cannot distinguish from actual remembrance of the touch of Peggotty's forefinger as she used to hold it out to me, and of its being roughened by needlework like a potato grater. No, this is test 1 still. I'm working on test 1 from yesterday. We just keep going. We only got up to 22 yesterday. We only got passage C. We're up to passage D. Yeah. Okay, is everybody good? All right, so I'm going to start rereading the second paragraph again. So I believe I can remember these two at a little distance apart, dwarfed to my sight by stooping down or kneeling on the floor, and I going unsteadily from the one to the other. I have an impression on my mind which I cannot distinguish from the actual remembrance of the touch of Peggotty's forefinger as she used it to hold out to me, and of its being ruffled by needlework like a potato grater. So first, like a potato grater, this right here is a simile. So we talked about figurative language yesterday. And if we have some time, we'll take some notes on that today, if not tomorrow when we do the essay. And it's really important to point out figurative language because they're likely going to ask you about it. And if you already find it before they ask you about it, you kind of know exactly what they're going for when you see that question. So it's easy for you guys to answer it. A simile is a comparison between two things using the words like or as. So in this case, he's comparing her finger to a potato grater, and we do have the word like or as. So that's how you know that this is a simile. A metaphor is a comparison without using like or as. So if they said her forefinger is a potato grater, that would be a metaphor. Okay, so what else do we get out of this second paragraph? Obviously, the narration continues, and the author seems to be thinking back to their memory. And in their memory, they're kneeling on the floor, and he's going between his mom and Peggotty. So it seems like Peggotty was somebody close to him, close in the family, somebody that was there all the time. And then this part, he's saying, which I cannot distinguish from actual remembrance. He's saying he has this memory in his head and he doesn't know if it's like a true memory or not. Doesn't know if it's like an actual remembrance or not. That's what he's trying to say. And that makes sense because the next paragraph starts, this may be my imagination. And that's what they mean that he cannot distinguish from actual remembrance. He's not sure if it actually happened or if he kind of made it up. So in the next paragraph, it starts with, this may be my imagination, though I think the memory of most of us can go farther back into such times than many of us suppose. Just as I believe the power of observation in numbers of very young children to be quite wonderful for its closeness and accuracy. What else do I remember? Let me see. There comes out of the cloud our house quite familiar in its earliest remembrance. On the ground floor is Peggotty's kitchen, opening into a backyard with a pigeon house on a pole in the center without any pigeons in it, a great dog kennel in a corner without any dog, and a quantity of fowls that looked terribly tall to me, walking about in a menacing and ferocious manner. There is one rooster who gets upon a post to crow and seems to take particular notice of me as I look at him through the kitchen window, who makes me shiver, he is so fierce. Of the geese outside of the side gate who come waddling after me with their long necks stretched out when I go that way, I dream at night, as a man environed by wild beasts might dream of lions. Okay, so what do we get out of this paragraph? So in this paragraph is largely descriptive. So this paragraph is largely made up of imagery and description. So if any question that asks you about what their house looked like, what Peggotty's kitchen looked like, anything that asks for the description of that, you go back into this paragraph. So this is a full description of Peggotty's / their kitchen / their house. We have a lot of descriptive words here. We have a lot of imagery. So if they ask you about the author invoking imagery or anything to do with description, this is like a big star that you would go back to this third paragraph. There's a lot of adjectives in here, so you can find a bunch. A great dog kennel, great is describing the dog kennel. Terribly is describing tall. Menacing and ferocious manner is describing the fowls. There's a bunch of adjectives here. Long necks. I dream at night as a man environed by wild dreams might dream of lions. Environed means like surrounded by. And he's trying to say that these geese, like he has nightmares of them, how they like kind of surround him and he feels like he's their prey, the same way that somebody might have nightmares of lions when they're surrounded by wild beasts. And it makes, like, if you guys had to guess, use context clues, and environment is your surroundings. So that's why if we turn the word environment into like a verb, environed by, that means surrounded by. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay. Next, here is a long walkway. What an enormous perspective I make of it. Leading to our front yard, there is nothing half so green that I know anywhere as the grass of that yard, nothing half so shady as its trees. And now I walk around the outside of our house with the latticed bedroom window standing open to let in the sweet smelling air to the garden at the back beyond the yard where the empty pigeon house and dog kennel are. It is a very preserve of butterflies as I remember it, with a high fence where the fruit cluster on the trees riper and richer than the fruit has ever been since in any garden, and where my mother gathers some in a basket while I stand by furtively bolting gooseberries and trying to look unmoved. Okay, so this paragraph is a continuation of the last paragraph, right? We have more description. So here's a long walkway, and then he's describing how green the grass is. Nothing half so green, nothing half as shady. So he's trying to say that like their grass was the greenest. There's nothing that's even half as green as their grass. Their trees were the shadiest. He doesn't know of a place that's even half as shady as their tree. So he's elevating their home, right? He's talking about their home and their backyard very positively. His perspective, all these memories are happy, right? Positive. And now I walk around the outside of our house, lattice bedroom windows, the sweet smelling air. This is another positively connotation adjective. And then we mentioned the pigeon house and the dog kennel, which is like an aside to paragraph 3, because that's where we first mentioned them. Again, butterflies is a positive thing. Fruit clusters is positive. All of these are happy things. Riper and richer than the fruit has ever been. Again, he's elevating, right? He's talking so positively. And then he's saying his mom is gathering some of the fruit in the basket, and he's standing furtively bolting gooseberries. So furtively is a way that kind of looks like secretly. So he's furtively trying to steal the gooseberries while his mom is picking the fruit to take home, and he's like stealing them while she's not looking, and he's trying to look unmoved. So he's trying to look like not suspicious, right? So he's doing something a little bit sus because he's stealing the fruit, but he's trying to look not suspicious. Somebody's asking what lattice means. A lattice is like kind of like a pattern like this. So they're describing the window pattern. Okay, if we keep reading, we have a great wind rises and the summer is gone in a moment. We are playing in the winter twilight, dancing about the parlor when my mother is out of breath and rests herself in an elbow chair. I watch her winding her bright curls round her fingers and straightening her waist, and nobody knows better than I do that she likes to look so well and is proud of being so pretty. So now we switch. So it seems like everything so far, the setting was in summer, and now we're switching to winter from here on down. So our setting, our time period of his memory is switching a little bit. And again, we have a positive memory, right? They're playing in the winter, dancing in the twilight. All of those are positive. And now he's describing his mom again, bright curls, positive. And he's proud of being so pretty. He's calling her pretty again, another positive. That is among my very earliest impressions, that in a sense that we were both a little afraid of Peggotty and submitted ourselves in most things to her direction, were among the first opinions, if they may be so called, that I ever derived from what I saw. So in conclusion, basically what we have is the author's like, this is my very first memory, right? So we have a personal account of this person's very first memory. Most of it seems to be largely positive. His mom seems to have, or his or her mom seems to have a really big role in their life. And most of it is very, very descriptive. So we have a lot on the setting, his environment, his home, his backyard. And then we have this character Peggotty, which is still not so clear who Peggotty is, but it seems like it's their neighbor, right? Like they share, her apartment seems to be on the ground floor. That's her kitchen. And he's saying that both him and his mom are a little bit afraid of Peggotty. Okay, so that's kind of everything that we got out of the story before we get to the questions. Does anybody have any other questions? Any words you guys want me to define, or just any questions in general based on how I read and what I sort of highlighted before we get to the questions?
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
What was the meaning of lattice?
So lattice is a pattern, right? So it kind of is like this, like what I drew here. It's like a pattern of like crosses usually. So they're using lattice here to describe the windows, the window pattern. Okay, so people are asking like just basic strategy questions. So somebody is saying, what would I suggest for longer passages? What you'll find is that the passages kind of, they're not consistent. So yesterday we read a really short one, if you remember, like this one was really, really short. And then there's going to be a poem, which is short. And then there's going to be longer ones. This one isn't too bad. The one that we read is the longest one since. So on the test, not all the passages are going to be really, really long. And not all the passages will be really, really short. You're going to get a mix. These passages, this sort of mix of passages, I think is the closest to what you guys will have on real test day, because this is a real released Hunter test. So this is the best sort of thing to practice from. And we wouldn't have touched test 2 yet. So I recommend highly that you guys take test 2 in a timed setting and use that as a full practice test, because this is going to be close to you for you guys to practice with. So this is what I think that this test is, I think, and test 2 is what you guys should really prepare for. The Kweller specific tests are longer and harder on purpose. Does that make sense? So you should focus, you should use those as practice, obviously, and aim for that, but those are meant to challenge you. Does that make sense? They are meant to be harder than the real test. If you want an example of exactly what the real test would be like, you should be comfortable with the real release test 1 and 2. Does that make sense? Okay. And then the other question, somebody said, should you skip some words while reading? What words should you skip? So what you're talking about is skimming. Some people recommend skimming. I usually only skim if I'm really running out of time and if it's like all descriptive. So like for example, in paragraph 3, as you start reading, you realize that the whole thing is description. So if it's kind of like if I'm anxious and I'm reading and it's not really like going into my head, but I notice that like, okay, this whole paragraph is just the same stuff. They're just descriptive. I would write something like description on the side and I would skip that whole paragraph and I would keep reading, especially if I'm running out of time. Does that make sense? So once you guys have a lot of practice with passages, you kind of get this intuition of like what's going to come next. What is the author going to keep talking about? And once you do that, it's a lot easier to know like what you can skip and what you can't. If you guys do not have any time issues, I wouldn't recommend skipping. There's no need. You're going to end up spending the time to go back into the passage anyways. But if you do have a time constraint, then absolutely that could be one strategy of how you guys kind of navigate the time constraint and finish on time is skimming certain passages. If I finish in exactly 3 hours, that's kind of like cutting it close. I like having at least 10 minutes at the end. So that would be a good, in at least 1 or 2 passages. If you skim, you'll finish a few minutes earlier. You'll have at least those 5 minutes at the end to at least flip through, make sure that you bubbled everything in, reread your essay, things like that. Okay, ready to start the questions? Okay, so the narrator as a child could best be described as blank. Okay, so one thing that we noticed right away is that overall, the narrator's recollection of his childhood was positive or negative. What do you guys think? Yeah, obviously positive, right? We saw a bunch of positively connotated words. So we're looking for an adjective that is positive. We want to describe the narrator as something positive. So right away, it would be really easy for you to get rid of miserable, right? That one is clearly negative. And then a word like educated is like, I mean, that's definitely a positive, but that is like a kind of like more like hard, like focus, like let's study type of word. And that's not necessarily the vibe of this passage, right? He's talking about like frolicking in the garden and picking berries and all this other stuff. So I wouldn't, there's no mention of his education, of his school life at all. Okay, so now we're between imaginative, silly, and loving. So silly means that there would also be some sort of like jokes mentioned in the passage, him playing jokes and being a practical joker, him anything to do with like humor or like playing one on somebody, and there's none of that either. So I would get rid of C as well. So now we're between imaginative and loving. So he definitely loves his mom, but would we describe him as loving? Is there enough in the test evidence for you guys to point out and say this is why he's loving? So is there anywhere where he is directly caring for his mom or something like that? There's not enough evidence for loving. The best answer here is going to be imaginative. And there's a bunch of evidence for imaginative because he constantly thinks about his remembrance. The type of language he's using is very like a lot of figurative language, which means he has like an imagination. Like the simile that we pointed out comparing to a potato grater, you need to be imaginative to be able to think through those types of things. Does that make sense? Okay, good. Okay, next, in lines 11 to 13, what does the narrator suggest? So nice for us, they're telling us exactly where to go back to. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to go back, and it's going to be right here at the beginning of this paragraph. And he says, I think the memory of most of us can go farther back into such times than many of us suppose. So basically, he says that he thinks our memory can go, we can actually remember more from earlier than we actually give ourselves credit for. So we should check our memories with others who were there, the opposite of this. He says our memories are more trustworthy than we think. Time alters our memories, the opposite of this. Hearing about our childhood affects our memories, the opposite of this. Only some young children have good memories, the opposite of this. The best answer is going to be E before even reading it. Early memories can be trusted more than we realize. I want you guys to get really comfortable with realizing that all of these answer choices are suggesting something negative. They're suggesting that we cannot remember our early memories as much as we could. And this is the one that stands out. So even if for some reason you weren't able to understand the way that the author said that, just looking at these answer choices, you should find the one that's kind of different than the other one. Does that make sense? In this case, it's the positive one. It could be the negative one too, but there's usually one choice that sticks out different. Yeah. So obviously use your own reading comprehension skills and support that and everything else. But if for some reason you guys are lost and you're not understanding the way that the words of the author is using, and I found that this passage was a little bit like difficult in terms of word choice.
It's the 8 and now it's bad.
You can always use that strategy of just picking the one that is different, the one that stands out. Somebody's asking how long you should take for each section of the test. So this test is good because it's fluid, right? So you guys have your own sort of ability to manage your own time, which is important because for most exams that I took, it wasn't like that. Right? Correct me if I'm wrong. That's true, right? You guys can. Is each section timed, or you can like go through the test? Yeah, exactly. So that's a really big advantage for you guys, because for most of the exams that I took in my life, they're section by section. So you can't really like switch out. You have to finish that section and you can't go back. So the way that you guys should work through the test is really up to the way that you've been practicing and up to the way that like what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are. So what I would do is I would do the essay first because I want to make sure that I have enough time for my essay. And also I find that writing, if you write an essay and then you like step out of it and do the other parts of the test, and then you're able to go back to it and reread it, you're most likely going to have like a better essay. Does that make sense? So I would agree with everybody that's doing the essay first. I would start with the essay. It also gives you like a direct time constraint. So it's easy to say like, okay, I'm going to give myself, let's say 50 minutes for the essay. And you have to force yourself into writing it in that space. And then I think that it depends on your strong point. Yeah. So I think it depends on where you should go after that. Depends on what you're good at. I prefer math. I always did when I was younger, and I would finish that faster. So I would probably leave math until the end because I know that if I spend more time on reading, I'm still likely going to finish the math. Versus if I do math first, then like it's just preference. Does that make sense? It just what depends on yourself. I don't think that you guys should start switching up your technique because your test is soon. It's this week. So I don't want you guys to like say, oh, like she said she would do it this way and completely switch the way that you've been doing it. It's important to practice consistently. You can split it in complete threes. You can do an hour of each. Some people like doing what they're good at first. Some people like doing what they're bad at first. It's completely personal preference. The way that I would do it is I would do the essay first, and then I would do my weak subject, and then I would do my strong subject. But that's just a preference. You guys absolutely do not have to do what I'm doing at all. There's no right way. But what is important is to understand that you have to use the fluidity of the test to your advantage. So think of a strategy that makes sense for you. And if you're struggling with some section and you're having a mind block, absolutely, I would say switch to the other section. Don't waste your time and think that you're stuck on reading. And you know what I mean? Just like if you're having a mental block and you can't understand that passage and you go to the next one and you're like freaking out with anxiety, you don't have to stay on that reading passage. Does that make sense? You don't have to stay on that section. If you want to switch to math and give yourself a break, that's absolutely allowed. And that's probably going to give you a better score in the end. Does that make sense? So you don't have to force yourself to do something just because of something. Does that make sense? You have to be as efficient as possible when you're taking these exams. That's the most important thing. Being a good test taker is really important. And it's something that will come to you guys as you keep practicing, right? Nobody is forcing you to take a test any way other than the way that you're comfortable. And the more comfortable you're going to be, the better you're going to do. Yeah, that's a good idea too. Somebody said they like writing their prompt at the end. Because when they read the prompt in the beginning, in the back of their head, they're thinking of it. Absolutely. We're going to talk a lot about the essay tomorrow. As long as you guys have a bunch of like a drafted essay before a time that you write, it's not going to be so difficult for you guys to write the essay because it's likely going to be a topic that you've practiced before or something similar to what you've practiced before. So you're going to have a lot of ideas to already apply to that essay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Do we have class tomorrow?
I know that I'm teaching an extra help thing 6 to 8, but I don't know about your regular classes at all. And the extra help thing is optional. But if you guys want the notes from it and you can't attend tomorrow, again, you can just email me and I will get them to you. Okay, let's go back to this passage and then we can save more time for like a Q&A type of portion at the end. But the takeaway from this is that there's no right way to do it. Whichever way makes sense to you, whichever way you've practiced is your way, is the right way to do it for you. Okay. The description of the geese in lines 20 to 22 suggests blank. So again, we're lucky because the author tells us where to go back to. So let's go back to 20 to 22. Of the geese outside the side gate who come waddling after me with their long necks stretched out. When I go that way, I dream at night, as a man surrounded by wild beasts might dream of lions. So basically he's getting, he has nightmares of the geese, right? And by dream at night, this is a negative description. As a man environed by wild beasts might dream of lions. So as somebody that's surrounded by wild beasts has nightmares of lions, he's having nightmares of the geese because they are waddling after him, right? So he's obviously a little bit scared of the geese. Something negative with the geese. That's all that you need to get out of that. You don't need to have a perfect understanding of what it means. You just need to know that it's something negative. So the narrator was intimidated by the geese. This is your answer choice. Some of you might ask, why isn't it choice A, has been hurt by them? This is a choice that takes it a little bit too far. There is nothing in the passage, there's no direct evidence that the geese have actually hurt him. He's just afraid of him because they like waddle after him, but they didn't physically inflict pain on him. They didn't physically hurt him. So this answer choice is a little bit too far. So you have to be wary of that. Versus this is exactly right. He was scared of them, but they didn't actually go so far as to hurt him. He was just intimidated by them. He was just afraid of them. And then choice C is a positive choice. So that one would be easy to eliminate. He didn't enjoy being with them. The geese thought the narrator was a dog. There's no evidence for that. We have no idea what the geese think. This passage is written from the author's point of view. We know what the author, the narrator thinks. We have no idea what the geese think. So there's no way this could be the answer. And the narrator was left alone too much. There's nothing to suggest that he was alone. And in this specific memory that he's describing to us, he's with his mom and Peggotty. So there's nothing about being alone. So this is not it either. So that's the way that you guys would eliminate. And then that's the way that you guys would think through between A and E if those were the two that you had left. Environed by, we talked about this before. Again, environment is like your surroundings, what's around you. And that's why the answer here is living among. Because if in your environment is wild beasts, that means you're living among wild beasts. And again, the way that you guys should do this is you should think about the root word. Where does this come from? And you should all know what the word environment means. And that's your sort of clue to figure out context clues, how they're using the word environed here, which is a verb form of the noun that you guys probably already know. Okay, number 27, the narrator makes an enormous perspective of the walkway in line 23 because the walkway is blank. So if we go back to 23, we say, here is a long walkway. What an enormous perspective I make of it, leading to our front yard. So this is a memory of him giving it back to us, right? And he's describing the long walkway, and he's telling us, for some reason, he's bringing this up. He's saying, what an enormous perspective I make of it. So this is a little bit of an inference question, right? So when you see something that's not a direct, the answer is not directly in the passage, they're asking us to infer. And they're saying, why does the author make this enormous perspective? So it is very long. This is the literal answer, right? So perhaps he's making this enormous perspective because the walkway is literally long. But if it's literally long, then why would he point out what an enormous perspective I'm making on it? Why would he mention perspective? If something is literally long, it's not a perspective that you're making of it. Does that make sense? It's just literally long. So this is a little bit of this answer choice is probably not right, because if he's mentioning perspective, then it's likely not just that it's long, right? There's probably something else to it. He's exaggerating it for a painting. Absolutely not. They never mentioned any paintings. This should be easy to eliminate. He thinks about it for a long time. It fills his memories, or he's seeing it the way that he did as a child. So because this is a memory, and because this is a recollection of a memory, it is likely that he is thinking back to it as he saw it when he was little, right? So if you're this like tiny person, obviously a long walkway looks huge to you. If you're a little kid that's like 3 feet tall, a table looks big to you, chairs look big to you, adults look huge to you. Once you grow up, the perspective sort of shifts. And that's exactly what he's kind of getting at here. I think this is one of the harder questions. But putting together the idea that this is a recollection of a memory and that he's small, that's how you can get to that inference. So someone's asking, why isn't it choice C? It fills his memories. So the reason it's not choice C is I feel like that choice is a little bit extreme for just that one walkway to fill his whole memory. The author the memory is more focused on the whole description of the outside. He doesn't really describe that walkway so much, except for saying that it's long, and except for saying that, mentioning his perspective on it. Does that make sense? So there's not enough in the passage that tells me that like everything in his memory is about this one walkway. It's not exaggerated or emphasized enough. So I would think that D is more likely, rather than his whole memory is filled by this one walkway. Does that make sense? So you're always weighing the answer choices, if that makes sense. That's the game that you're playing with this. Like it could be C, it could be D. What is more likely? What is better? What is stronger? Does that make sense? Some things are very easy to eliminate right away because you're like, that's definitely wrong. But even if an answer choice is somewhat okay, you want to pick the best one that they give you. And that's the game that you're constantly playing with reading comprehension. Okay, and then lines 28 and 29 about furtively and unmoved. If you guys remember those two lines about him stealing gooseberries. So his mom is gathering some fruit in a basket while I stand furtively bolting gooseberries and trying to look unmoved. So this is when his mom is like collecting all the fruit in the basket and he's stealing the gooseberries and he's trying to look not suspicious, right? Unmoved. So furtively means he's sneakily or like low-key trying to take it, and he's looking unmoved, so he's trying to look like he's not suspicious, like he didn't just steal a gooseberry. So now let's go back and find the lines, and we have right here sneakily and we have right here innocent. So one thing that should help you is that these should be the opposite of each other, and sneaky and innocent are opposite of each other. So that is one thing that can help you between the two answer choices. So if you weren't sure about one, but you're unmoved is an easier one, I think, to figure out. You're sure about the other one, you can work backwards or work forwards. Does that make sense? Okay, line 31, the seasons change quickly. So remember, at this part is when it says in a blink of an eye, the summer is over, now it's winter. So here, the summer is gone in a moment, and now we are playing in the winter twilight. So what's going on here is that it's not that the time is literally going fast. This is a memory, right? So we just jumped from one memory into another memory, is what happened between those two lines. It's not like the author is literally remembering that there was a big wind and all of a sudden it was winter. That's not like the timeline of events. Instead, it's just the way that you remember things, right? Memories are non-sequential. Memories have gaps in between. You don't remember every single tiny day from your childhood. Certain things stick out. So this one memory stuck out of this description of the summer and this backyard and this warmth and all of that. And then we jump to another memory, which is them dancing in the winter twilight in the parlor. So that's what went on. So let's find an answer choice that supports that. So again, a choice like A is a little bit too literal. It's not that the weather in England is unpredictable and that literally it was summer and then there was a wind and all of a sudden it's winter. This is a memory recollection. So obviously that's not what happened. The author just didn't remember everything in between, and his next memory that he chose to share with us was this winter time. So this is not it. We can eliminate that. Children do not have a clear sense of time. Again, this is not what they're saying either. And the author would probably disagree with that because he's saying that your memories are more reliable than you think. Memories rush together. Exactly. We jump from one memory to another. There's a hurricane. Nobody said that. And something sad's about to occur. Again, nothing sad happens. We finish the passage. And then finally, the tone of this entire piece could best be described as nostalgic, right? He's missing his memories. He's talking about them fondly, positively. And anytime you're thinking about like reminiscing or memory, nostalgia is a big word that falls into that same family, right? So even if we knew nothing else, but we knew that this narrator is positively talking about his childhood memories, a word to describe that is nostalgic. That's also the only one that's like somewhat positive. All the other choice are somewhat negative. Okay, good. Yes, it's D. Anyone have any last minute questions on this passage? Anything you guys want me to explain better? Any choices you want me to show you how I got rid of? Any words to define? Anything else? Yes, I'm going to email the notes to everybody that asks. Just send me an email after class and say, hey, I was an extra help, email me the notes. It's because you guys aren't a hard class that I have every week. I don't have all of your emails, right? This class is open to everybody. So I don't know how to email it to you guys without you sending me an email first. Here's my email. Okay, so somebody wants to talk about how we could eliminate all of these other choices for 26. So again, you should be able to understand living amongst matches with environment. But how do we get rid of all these other choices? So let's go back and see how it's used. A man environed by wild beasts. So a man environed by wild beasts may dream about, right? That's the sentence. So if the man is still dreaming, we definitely know that he's not going to be eaten by the wild beasts. So this one we could eliminate. Polluted by wild beasts. When we think about so the reason why I think they even put polluted as an answer choice is because the word sounds like environment, and some of the students might think, okay, environment, pollution, and make that false connection. But the way that I usually do this is I replace the word that they're giving me into the word and I see if the sentence still makes sense. So a man polluted by wild beasts may dream about. It's a very weird description to think about a man being polluted by animals. That's not really how the word is used. When we think about pollution, we think about polluting the air with chemicals or gases or polluting our environment with whatever, with oils or whatever else. Does that make sense? We don't use the word or the phrase polluted by to describe a man. So I would eliminate this one as well. A man created by wild beasts also doesn't make sense. Men aren't made by beasts. And then a man known among wild beasts may dream about. So I think C is the trickiest one to cross out. The problem with C is that we change the meaning, right? So if a man is known among wild beasts, then the man isn't afraid of the wild beasts, right? So if the man is like known among the wild beasts, then he shouldn't be afraid of them. He shouldn't have nightmares about them, right? He's kind of like the big shot. All the wild beasts know him. But we're trying to say the opposite. We're trying to say a more neutral, like he's living among them and that's why he's terrified of them. So I think C is the hardest one to cross out, but you guys should have been able to get down between B and C. And then the evidence for B should have been living among sounds like environment, right? Surrounded by, living with, you live with whoever's in your environment. That's the way that I would have probably thought about this. Okay, any other questions with this passage? Sure, so somebody asked me to do 28 and 29. So we would do the same thing. So this was furtively bolting gooseberries, furtively bolting gooseberries, trying to look unmoved. So again, the way that I would do this is I would do these questions in concert, and I would replace the words into there, right? So slowly bolting gooseberries, trying to look unlucky. Does that make sense? No, why would the narrator be trying to look unlucky? Trying to look athletic doesn't make sense. Trying to look adult doesn't make sense. Trying to look unhappy doesn't make sense. The only one that's viable is trying to look innocent. Once you figure out that this is the one that sounds the most likely, you say, okay, so if someone is trying to look innocent, that means they're doing something that's not so innocent. They're doing something a little bit suspicious. And then based on that, you would find the choice that matches, which is sneakily in this case. Does that make sense? It's a game of replacing. Sometimes it's hard for students to keep like flipping back and forth, which is why I usually rewrite the phrase for myself. So I have it in front of me and then I just replace it in my head each time. And I'm like, which one makes the most logical sense? Does that make sense? Okay. All right. Any other questions with this passage? Okay, so in that case, let's move on to this one. I think we only have, we only have two left. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna finish these two passages and then we'll do notes. And then if we have time, we'll do math. Okay, so this one is telling us that it's adapted by a piece with Abraham Lincoln. They usually don't give us any sort of blurb, but if they're giving us that, definitely read it. Could be a question on it, could help you with a question at least. So we know that this has something to do with a piece that Lincoln wrote. Okay, so, and we also know that it's written by Abraham Lincoln. So what we're going to read about is, this is not going to be like this is probably going to be like a third person type of narrative. Okay. Niagara Falls. By what mysterious power is it that millions and millions are drawn from all parts of the world to gaze upon Niagara Falls? Okay, so the way that he's starting his piece is just with an exclamation point, Niagara Falls, and that's kind of giving us the vibe or the mood of the passage, which is going to be an article about Niagara Falls. And then notice right here, we start with a rhetorical question. And it seems like this is going to be what the passage is kind of getting at, right? Trying to answer this question of why are people attracted to Niagara Falls? Why are they drawn to it? Why do they come from all over the world to Niagara Falls? There is no mystery about the thing itself. Every effect is exactly what any intelligent man, knowing the causes, would anticipate. If the author moving onward in a great river reaches a point where there is a perpendicular drop of 100 feet in descent, it is plain the water will have a violent and continuous plunge at that point. It is also plain the water, thus plunging, will foam and roar and send up a mist continuously, and that during sunshine there will be perpetual rainbows. The mere physical reality of Niagara Falls is only this. Okay, so he's saying, why are people obsessed with Niagara Falls? And he's saying there's no mystery about the thing itself. There's no mystery about the literal waterfall. That's what he's saying. And he's explaining it. He's saying any man that has any semblance of intelligence, right, any brain, should understand that if there's a river and then there's a drop, the water is going to go really fast and there's going to be rainbows and it's going to roar and it's going to foam. And that's the only thing that makes sense, right? Naturally. If that's the environment, that's what's going to make sense. So that's what he's saying here. And he's saying the mere physical reality of Niagara Falls is only this. So the literal sense of it, the physical reality, the thing that we're actually looking at, the waterfall, that's just this. There just happens to be a drop, and that's the way that nature looks. But in the next paragraph, we have contrast, right? So you guys need to be comfortable with contrast words like yet, but, however. So all of these words are signifying contrast. So he's saying one thing here, even if you don't understand what, but you should understand that since this is yet, another one would be but or however. We're going to say a different thing here. But this physical reality is only a very small part of Niagara's wonder. Its power to excite thought and emotion is its great charm. So he's saying that its power to make people think and make people feel is the real reason why it's magnificent. It's not the physical wonder that people go there to look at. It's not the literal waterfall. It's the way that it makes them feel. It's what emotions it excites in them. The geologist will demonstrate that the plunge was once at Lake Ontario and it has worn its way back to its present position. He will ascertain how fast it is wearing now, and so get a basis for approximating how long it has been wearing back from Lake Ontario, and finally demonstrate that this world is at least 14,000 years old. So here he's talking about the geologist and everything that the geologist can figure out about Niagara Falls. He's saying that originally the plunge was at Lake Ontario, but because if you guys think about logically, the way a waterfall works, this is ground, right? And water is going down, down, down. So it's going to sort of like break down this ground. So he's saying the waterfall is moving back. And based on how fast it's breaking down the ground, he can like work backwards and figure out where it was originally. He will ascertain how fast it is wearing now. So what do we mean by ascertain? He will sort of analyze or figure out, right? He will make certain, he will figure out how fast it is wearing now, and then he can get a basis of where it was originally. And based on this analysis, we can figure out that this waterfall is 14,000 years old. The physicist will estimate with approximate accuracy that this vast amount of water constantly pouring down is supplied by an equal amount constantly lifting up by the sun through evaporation, and he is overwhelmed in the contemplation of the vast power of the sun is constantly exerting in quiet, noiseless operation of lifting water up to be rained down again. So we're saying, so basically this passage is about the physical qualities of the waterfall, right? Which is why we're mentioning these sort of science figures. So the geologist can figure out how far it's been going. The physicist can figure out that the only way that this can be true for the water to keep rolling down, how come we never run out of water, right? Falling. And the physicist explains that this is because at the same rate that the water is falling, water from down here is evaporating back up and then going back. Does that make sense? So we have like the cycle of evaporation. If you guys remember from whenever you learned that in your science days, that's what he's getting at here. And he's talking about the vast power of the sun, how powerful the sun is, and how the sun is constantly working in quiet, noiseless operation of lifting water. And notice here a little bit, I would argue that this is a little bit of personification, right? Because the sun isn't an actual person working and exerting and noiseless operation. Things are just happening, right? This is just the environment and the natural world we live in. But he is personifying the sun a little bit, in my opinion. And then we have more contrast, right? But again, so I told you guys that this is a signifying contrast. So he's telling us about all of these scientific factors, and then he's saying, but still there is more. Niagara Falls calls up the indefinite past. When Columbus first saw this continent, even when Adam was first created. So this is significant because he's trying to refer to Adam and Eve. So he's saying even when the world was first created, even when Columbus first came to this continent, then as now, Niagara was roaring here. The eyes of that species of extinct giants, the dinosaurs whose bone fill the mounds of America, have gazed on Niagara as ours do now. Older than the first man, Niagara is strong and as fresh today as 10,000 years ago. The mammoth and the mastodon, now so long dead that fragments of their monstrous bones alone testify that they ever lived, have gazed on Niagara. And in that long, long time, it has never been still for a single moment. It has never dried, never slept, and never rested. So in the end, he's personifying the waterfalls a little bit as well. Okay, so what is Abraham Lincoln trying to tell us? He's trying to tell us that Niagara Falls is magical, not because of its literal sense that it's a waterfall, but because of how long it's been around, because of how consistently it's been around and how dinosaurs looked at it the same way we look at it. And that's why people are so obsessed with it. That's why people come from all over the world to see it. Yeah, contemplation kind of means like when you're thinking about something. So you can be contemplating like your choices. It means like thinking about, let's like a reflective thought, thinking for like a long time, reflecting back on something. Okay, any questions on this passage before we jump to the questions they're asking us? Okay, so when Lincoln states there is no mystery to Niagara Falls, he means blank. So first of all, if we remember, I told you guys yesterday, the questions are usually chronological. So we want to go back and remember, when does he say there's no mystery to Niagara Falls? And just to give yourself a logical way of going back, you can look here, line 9, and you know that this is the first question. So the answer to this question is going to be before line 9. Does that make sense? So that kind of gives you a framework of where am I going to go back in the passage to find this place. So he says it right here. There is no mystery about the thing itself. And then he explains the physical nature of Niagara Falls. Remember, he says, well, it makes sense because there's a drop and water is going to fall. And it only makes sense that when water is falling such a great distance, it's going to roar and there's going to be rainbows and all this other stuff. And he finishes with the mere physical reality of Niagara Falls is only this. So the reason he's saying that there's no mystery is because there's a clear logical reason as to why there is a waterfall and as to why it looks so beautiful and everything else. If we look at the answer choices, just to play the elimination game a little bit, it says choice B says the falls have no effect on the viewer. It's the exact opposite of this, right? Of course, the falls have an effect on a viewer. That's why everybody wants to go visit it. That's why he wrote this whole passage. He's trying to explain why is there such an effect on the viewer of Niagara Falls. See, everything about the falls has been studied. You see this word everything. Very unlikely that you're picking a word with everything in it, an answer choice with everything. Very unlikely you're picking an answer choice with never in it. This is exactly what we call extreme. It's not possible that everything about anything was studied. Does that make sense? Of course, there's so much more to study about Niagara Falls. You're not going to pick an answer choice with everything in it. Visiting the falls is simple. Again, this is similar to saying there's no effect. It's exactly the opposite of simple. It's like complex. He's trying to figure out why people feel all these emotions when they see the falls. And that's why he wrote this whole passage. And also that's not the evidence of why he says there's no mystery to it, because he then goes on to give the scientific explanation. And then the evidence for this is also why he calls on the geologist and why he calls on the physicist later on. So all of this is supporting the scientific explanation part, versus there's nothing later on in the passage to describe the simplicity. And then E is clearly not right because there is so much more to say about the falls, and that's what the rest of the passage is about. Does that make sense? There is much more to say about it, right? Because he says, but yet this isn't it. Yet this doesn't explain enough. And then he that whole last paragraph about the mammoths and the dinosaurs, all of that is everything he has more to say about the falls. Okay, 33 as used in line 9. What does excite mean? It's power to excite thought and emotion. So to elicit thought, right? To get people to think. So to excite thought and emotion. So what I would do is I would rewrite this. So excite thought and emotion. And then what we're going to do is we're going to replace all of the answer choices into excite and see which one makes the most sense. So intimidate thought and emotion. Intimidate is the opposite, right? So intimidate is a negative word, and it also isn't really clear how we could intimidate thought. So that's not it. Inspire thought and emotion. Yes, that's what we want to do. We want to pull out emotion and thought out of people, and that's what the falls is doing. So this is a good answer choice. Evade is the opposite of pull out. Evade means like we would want to eliminate thought and emotion. So it's not going to be that. Clarify and process are very similar, and neither of them is the right word here. We don't want to clarify the thought and emotion. We don't want to process it. We want to pull it out. Does that make sense? We don't have it yet. So the best answer choice here is B. Okay, next, ascertain. We talked about this. This we said means figure out. Ascertain how fast it is wearing now. And again, what we would do is we would just replace each word in the answer choices with this. Guess how fast it is wearing now. Could be, this sounds okay. Schedule how fast it is wearing now makes no sense, right? We're not scheduling it. We're trying to figure out how fast it's wearing. Demand how fast it is wearing now. Again, we're not demanding it. It's already wearing. We're just trying to learn or analyze or figure out how fast. Determine is a good one. And then publish how fast it's wearing. Again, we're not writing an article. We're just trying to figure it out. So when we're between guess and determine, determine here is the better option because it's a little bit more scientific. The physicist isn't literally making up a guess. Guess sounds like there's no sort of like mathematical quality or like reasoning to it. It sounds like you're kind of just like, oh, see, right? Oh, let's say it's been wearing 75 miles per hour or whatever, right? So determine is a little bit more like scientific, and it's the better word to use in the context of this like physicist or geologist figuring something out rather than just guess, which like any lay person can do. Does that make sense? So you want to make sure that the word matches the context. The sentence needs to make sense, but you also want to make sure that it matches the choice, the language of the tone rather. If there's an answer choice with a word you don't know, first you replace all the words that you do know. If one of them makes sense and you can support it in your head, forget about the word you don't know. If none of them are seeming good to you, then you have to play the elimination game and you have to eliminate. And then you try to use context clues to figure out the word that you don't know. If there's any, like, remember the word environed, even if you don't know what that is, it sounds like environment. Or ascertain has the word certain in it. So ascertain literally means make certain or determine. So you use any sort of hints like that. And if you can't use any hints like that, then you kind of at the end have to guess based on the choices that you eliminated and whatever you have left. How do you eliminate answer choices if you don't think any of the words would work? So you have to go one by one and tell yourself, why wouldn't this work, right? Like, don't just be like, I don't think that's it. Like, force it out of yourself, as if, let's say you're talking to me, and pretend that I'm asking you the question, like, why don't I think it's intimidate? Like, make yourself have a reason. And if you can't tease it out of yourself, write down the reason. And then once you have all the reasons, then you can kind of rank them. Like, which reason was I kind of reaching at because I just think it doesn't sound right or something like that, and which reason is like legitimate, and try to use reasons that are legitimate in terms of like positive connotation, negative connotation. Does it make sense in the context, or does it make sense in the context? If any of the two words match, so for example, clarify and process are very close, you can use that to eliminate both of them. Does that make sense? Because two synonyms can't both be the answer. So between all of those strategies, there should be enough to eliminate at least some of the answer choices. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Next, the geologist and the physicist. So both of these are explaining like the science behind the falls, which is exactly what choice A says. So I'm pretty comfortable with thinking this is the answer right away. But we do want to look at the other ones. Met with Lincoln during his visit, published their studies. There's no evidence that they met with Lincoln, right? So just because he's mentioning them doesn't mean that he necessarily physically met with them. So there's nothing to prove this. And again, with the publishing, there's nothing with publishing. And once we are able to eliminate B and C, we know it's not all of the above. And then it's not none of the above because they do have an interest of the science, and they are explaining the science of the falls in some way. And that's why Lincoln is referring to them, to sort of cover the scientific part of it and then say, okay, so the science is the science. That's not what makes it special. Here's what makes it special. And then tell us that whole paragraph of what actually makes it special. Okay, next, in the fifth paragraph, when Lincoln says that Niagara Falls calls up the indefinite past, he means blank. Okay, so someone is saying, how would he know their thoughts if he didn't meet up with them? It's possible that he read something they wrote. It's possible that they told somebody else who told Lincoln. Either way, like there's not enough evidence for him, like you're reaching, does that make sense? There's nothing in the passage that told us that they met. So there's no reason for you to assume that. It's a little bit too far for it to be an inference. Does that make sense? Because maybe they didn't publish it. Maybe they told his advisor and his advisor told them. Does that make sense? There's nothing that specifically says that he published it, or nothing to even suggest that in his writing, right? He didn't say like an article geologist published, or like in this blah, 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 the geologist said. He's talking very like, it might be that he's not even talking about one singular geologist, one singular physicist. Does that make sense? It could be that he read several things and he's like, the geologist will demonstrate. Does that make sense? It's nothing like legitimate. Do you know what I mean? He's not referring to one specific publicist, physicist, or geologist that said this one specific thing. He's saying that a geologist will demonstrate, like a geologist, his job is to figure out how long it's been wearing down, and a physicist will job is to figure out, like, does that make sense? It's not like he literally talked to a geologist or a physicist and he's like trying to use their scientific backing. He's saying that this profession can figure out this part of the science of it, and this profession can figure out this part of the science of it, but I don't care about the science of it because that's not what makes the falls so cool to me. What makes it so cool to me is that dinosaurs saw the same thing that I'm looking at. Does that make more sense? So he's not like literally trying to like refer back to what one geologist or physicist said. And then the other part with choice B is during his visit and during his visit to the falls. So that makes it even more unlikely. That makes it seem like when he visited the falls, he went with a geologist and a physicist, and that's not what he's saying at all. Does that make sense? That's another reason to eliminate choice B. Okay, fifth paragraph calls upon the indefinite past. So if we go to line 19, That's right here. Niagara calls upon the indefinite past. He says that, and then he follows up on it, and he mentions Columbus, he mentions Adam and Eve, and then he mentions dinosaurs and the mammoth and the mastodon. So what he means by Niagara calls upon the indefinite past is that Niagara was literally there before dinosaurs and before, like, even back to the time of Adam and Eve, which is what he's believing, like when the world first started, this waterfall was still there. So that's choice E. Niagara has existed since before recorded time. So it's existed since forever, since Adam and Eve, since dinosaurs, since before people were around, all this other stuff. If we look at all these choices, Niagara Falls past has been written about. That's not what he's trying to say. He's instead trying to say that it's been around forever. It makes him think of past events in his life. No, the events of the past are not in his life, right? He wasn't alive when the dinosaurs were out. It was the dream of explorers to find Niagara. Not really. They didn't even know Niagara was there. And it's hard to know the past of anything. A little bit too existential. That's not what he's saying. Okay, by the end of the passage, Lincoln's attitude towards Niagara Falls is blank. So definitely something positive, right? So quickly we can get rid of all of these: fear, disapproval, concern. All of these are negative, and we're between satisfaction and awe. Awe is closer. He is admiring it. He's kind of like in awe of it. Exactly. Awe is the perfect word. In shock of how amazing and beautiful it is. Satisfaction is not really the right word. You're satisfied after you have like a delicious salad for lunch, not necessarily after you see this sort of like beautiful natural beauty that's been around for a gajillion years and the dinosaurs looked at it. We need a word that's a little bit stronger and more like emotional than just satisfaction. Okay, in this passage, Lincoln suggests that Niagara Falls is timeless. Absolutely. He says it's been around from Adam and Eve to now, to the dinosaurs, to the mastodon. Is unstoppable. Obviously, who can stop a waterfall? Fascinating. That matches this right here. And him feeling awe or fascination with it. And once you know that more than one of them is true, we know the answer is all of the above. Okay. Any other questions with this passage? Any words you guys want me to define? Anything else that came up with us doing this? Okay, so then what we'll do is we'll do the very last passage together, and then we'll do some notes, and then we might have some time at the end if you guys want to do some quick math questions or maybe topics that you guys need help with. Okay, all right, let's read the last one. This last one is a little bit longer. Okay, July came on with that breathless, brilliant heat which makes the plains of Kansas and Nebraska the best corn country in the world. It seems as if we could hear the corn growing in the night. Under the stars, one caught a faint crackling in the dewy, heavy odored cornfields where the feathered stalks stood so juicy and green. Okay, so from the first paragraph, we are learning about the setting, right? So we are in the summer months in the plains of Kansas and Nebraska. So we're in the summer corn country. And we have this right here, which is personal pronoun we. So I'm guessing that this might be written from the first person. And then later on, we will confirm that because we have an I here. And we are like describing the cornfields, right? So faint crackling in the dewy, heavy odored cornfields where the feathered stalks stood so juicy and green. So I'm guessing that this is pretty positive, talking about the corn stalks that are juicy and green. That's good. The plants aren't like dead and limp, and they're heavy odored, which is good too, right? Like aromatic. We want our plants to smell a lot. Okay, the burning sun of those few weeks, so burning sun, burning is describing the sun, with occasional rains at night, secured the corn. So that's good, the corn is growing. Once the milky ears were formed, we had little to fear from dry weather. The men were working so hard in the wheat fields that they did not notice the heat, though I was kept busy carrying the water for them, and grandmother and Antonia had so much to do in the kitchen that they could not have told them whether one day was hotter than another. So grandmother Antonia, we are learning about these two characters. We're learning that it's really, really hot in the heat, but the men are working so hard that they are not even thinking about it. And that the narrator is bringing them water, the workers water, and that grandmother and Antonia are so busy in the kitchen that they don't really know about the weather issues. Each morning, while the dew was still on the grass, Antonia went up with me to the garden to get early veggies for dinner. Grandmother made her wear a sunbonnet, but as soon as we reached the garden, she threw it on the grass and let her hair fly in the breeze. I remember how, as we went over the pea vines, beads of perspiration used to gather on her upper lip like a little mustache. So again, we have a little bit of like nostalgic memories here. The narrator is thinking back. And we're getting a little bit of insight about what grandmother and Antonia are like. Grandmother seems to be like any grandmother, wear a sunbonnet because it's too hot and she doesn't want like her head to get too warm. And then Antonia is like a little bit disobedient to the grandmother, right? So once she gets there, she takes it off and lets her hair run loose. Oh, better I like to work out of doors than in a house, she used to sing joyfully and unselfconsciously in her broken English. I not care that your grandmother says it makes me like a man. I like to be like a man. She would toss her head and ask to feel her muscles swell on her brown arm. We were glad to have her in the house. She was so gay and responsive that one did not mind her heavy running step or her clattery way with pans. Grandmother was in high spirits during the weeks that Antonia worked for us. Okay, so now we're getting more insight into the characterization, right? It seems like Antonia is somebody who works for them. And it seems like Antonia likes to work outside of the house more than inside of the house. And it seems like they like Antonia, right? The grandmother is happy and high spirits when Antonia was there. And Antonia is described as gay and responsive, which means like happy and answering everything that they need. All the nights were close and hot during that harvest season. Their harvesters slept in the hayloft because it was cooler than in the house. I used to lie in my bed by the open window, watching the heat lightning play softly along the horizon or looking up at the gaunt frame of the windmill against the blue night sky. One night there was a beautiful electric storm, though not enough rain fell to damage the cut grain. The men went down to the barn immediately after supper, and when the dishes were washed, Antonia and I climbed on the slanting roof of the chicken house to watch the clouds. The thunder was loud and metallic, like the rattle of the sheet iron, and the lightning broke in great zigzags across the heavens, making everything stand out and come close to us for a moment. Half the sky was checkered with black thunderheads, but all of the west was luminous and clear. In the lightning flashes, it looked like deep blue water with a sheen of moonlight on it, and a mottled part of the sky was like marble pavement. Okay, so all of this is a huge description of this storm. And we have a lot of descriptive words, we have a lot of adjectives, we have a lot of metaphors. It looked like the deep blue water. That's a simile. It was like marble pavement, another simile, like the quay of some splendid seacoast city doomed to destruction, another simile. Grandmother came to the door and said it was late and we would get wet out there. So in typical grandma fashion, she was like, come back in. But all of this is just description, right? So even if some of this faded out, we know that there's a lot of description here, there's a lot of imagery, and there's a lot of figurative language here. In a minute we come, Antonia called back to her, and I like your grandmother and all things here, she sighed. I wish my papa lived to see the summer. I wish no winter ever come again. It will be summer a long while yet, I reassured her. Why aren't you always nice like this, Tony? How nice? Why just like this, like yourself? Why do you always try to be like your brother Ambrosch? She put her arms under her head and laid back, looking up at the sky. If I live here like you, that is different. Things will be easy for you, but they will be hard for us immigrants. Okay, so in the end here, we get a little bit of like real conversating between them. And we see their relationship a little bit, and we see the soft side of Antonia come out, where she's saying, I like your grandmother and I like it here. And she wishes that her dad lived to see the summer and she wishes the summer lasts forever. And he's trying to reassure her, saying, why aren't you always nice like this? Summer will last a long time. And then he's trying to say, like, be yourself. Don't try to be like your brother. And then she's kind of giving out her real struggle, which is like, things are easy for her, for this person. But if she stays here, things will be difficult for her as an immigrant. Okay, so in this story, we have another sort of narrative, another personal memory being given back to us, and a little bit of character development here with Antonia and the narrative, and a lot of description in that big long paragraph that we just read. Okay, any questions before we get to the questions that they're asking us? The class tomorrow is 6 to 8. I do believe it's a different link actually. I can send it to you guys. It's going to be this. But don't worry about it. You don't have to write this down because I'm sure that Miss Kweller is going to she's going to email it to everybody. But I think this is going to be the Zoom link for tomorrow and for Tuesday. But again, you guys don't have to worry about saving that because it's going to come in an email. And if you don't have it by tomorrow, you can also just email me and I'll send you the link. Okay, somebody's saying, how can we do all this in an hour limit? Because you're not going to read out loud, which takes longer, and you're not going to keep stopping. You have to do a lot of the things that I'm doing in the back of your head. And that's what's going to make it go faster. Okay, let's try these questions. Okay, the description of the setting in paragraph 1 suggests that this is a place of blank. So if we remember and we go back to the setting, this is about the cornfields, right? So the best corn country, and we talk about the corn growing, the heavy odored. Remember, we put these positives here. So we're looking for a positive word that's talking about how well the corn is growing. And how not just that it's growing, but that it's creating good crop, right? Crop that's juicy and crop that's green. So if we look at the options here, oppression is very negative and has nothing to do with how things grow. Famine is the exact opposite of this. That means starving, and we're saying the crop is growing and it's juicy. Wordliness is just not necessarily the right description for how things are growing and crop. Wordliness is somebody, it means like something like sophisticated and experienced, and that's not how we would describe crops. Abundance is exactly it, right? Things are growing in abundance. The setting is abundant. The crop is succeeding there. And again, education isn't necessarily the right word here either. Okay, when the narrator is saying that his family was not afraid of the dry weather, he is saying what? So this is mentioned when they say that the corn kind of is already okay. The corn is already fully formed. That's this answer here. And we can prove it by going back into the passage right here. It says the sun and the rain has already secured the corn. So the corn is already okay. The milky ears were formed. We had little to fear from dry weather. They had little to fear because the corn kind of was already developed. It already started to grow and everything was going to be fine. The corn has not been harvested yet. This is not true. Harvested means they literally like gathered the corn already. The corn is still growing. It has nothing to do with Antonia here. It has nothing to do with wheat, and it has nothing to do with the heat. They're talking about the crop. The characters don't notice. The characters don't notice because they're always busy. That answer is choice B, and we have direct evidence for that. If we want to go back into the passage, remember they were saying that Antonia and Grandma are busy, were busy in the kitchen. And the workers were so busy like tending to the crop. And both groups were occupied. So right here, they had so much to do in the kitchen, so they couldn't tell you whether one day was hot or another. And then the men were working so hard that they did not notice the heat. So the evidence for both of those is in paragraph 2. And you can write that for yourself here. Paragraph 2 has the evidence here. Okay, next, the description of Antonia and her statements in lines 14 to 17 suggest that she is blank. So if we go back to 14 and 17, that's right here. It says, I like to work outdoors. She says joyfully and unselfconsciously in her broken English. I not care that your grandmother says it makes me like a man. I like to be like a man. She would toss her head and ask me to feel the muscles swell in her brown arm. So she's definitely nature loving, right? So this one is obvious because she says she likes to work outside. And now we need to see if at least one more is true, because then we can pick all of the above. So she's definitely a little bit unconventional, right? She's kind of saying like, I don't care if I'm a man, like, and this passage is clearly written back in the day. So then it was probably like more unconventional to say than it is now. And she's saying, I don't care if I'm a man, feel my muscle, which seems to be something unconventional for that time for women to act and say like. So that's how we know that unconventional is a word. And then proud is true as well, because she kind of doesn't care. She's proud of what she's doing, what she's saying. She's just being herself. Does that make sense? This matches the word like unselfconsciously that they use to describe her in that paragraph. Okay, next, the passage is suggesting who is Antonia. So it's clear that Antonia is somebody that works for them, choice D. There's a bunch of evidence here that she works for them. First of all, she literally says, I like to work out of doors. And they say, we were glad to have her in the house during the weeks that Antonia worked for us. So there's a bunch of evidence that Antonia is somebody that works for them. And out of the answer choices, a maid is the only one that is working for them. The other things are all relatives. So the evidence for this is in paragraph 3. And the word that you should have focused on is worked for us. Okay, next, Antonia's running step and clattery way with pans most likely suggest what? So clattery way with pans clatter like when you drop them or when you place them like aggressively and you hear that like sound of all the pots and pans hitting against each other. That's what clatter means. So clatter has to do with her clumsiness. That means she's not putting them calmly. Does that make sense? And then energy means running step. Running step means that she's kind of like running around. She has a lot of energy, right? She's not walking like she's like half alive. She has like a trot to her step. So that's why it's energy and clumsiness. Okay, so anger is a little bit of a negative word here. Running step doesn't mean she's angry, first of all. And if we go back in this passage, they're talking about her positively. Does that make sense? They're saying we were glad to have her in the house. We were happy to have her in a house. She was happy. Gay here is a synonym for happy, and responsive, meaning she did what she was told. And we did not mind her heavy running step or her clattery way with pans. So they're talking about her positively. And then choice D is saying like, we didn't mind her being like really angry. That's not the right word. Does that make sense? Like if we're saying like, we loved having her around. We didn't mind that she was like a little bit high energy and kind of clumsy, right? We wouldn't say we loved having her around. We didn't mind that she was like an angry, horrible person. Does that make sense? Angry is a little bit too strongly negative here versus like clumsy is like a cutesy, like not necessarily horrible, bad quality that people would mind. Does that make sense logically? And then D, strength and happiness. Again, we're looking for something at least slightly negative because we're saying that we loved having her. We didn't mind her strength and happiness. Both of those are like good qualities. Does that make sense? Versus like clumsiness is something that could be like a little bit of an annoying quality, but not like bad enough as angry. You're trying to find that like happy medium that would make sense in that tone. Okay, next, the narrator seems to view the storm as blank. So the storm line is here, right? And the storm seems to be thrilling to the narrator, right? They're both afraid of it, but at the same time, they're watching it and they're kind of like amazed by it. And they are describing it like they call it a beautiful electric storm. So we're looking for a more like positive atmosphere here. And that's why the best word is thrilling. It's not frightening. because they're out there watching it. They're not like, oh my God, it was so terrifying, I don't want to see it. And it's not silly, confining, or ordinary. None of these are actually good enough adjectives to talk about a storm. Thrilling is a good one because they're both afraid of it because there's a big storm, but they're also kind of like in awe of it and excited by it. And that's why they call it a beautiful electric storm. Okay, Antonia's statements in line 45 and 46 imply that she blank. So what are we implying at the end of the passage? Here in 45 and 46, she's saying that if she lives here, things are not going to be so easy for her. Things are going to be hard for her as an immigrant. So what is the implication of that? So A, she wants to live far away from Kansas and Nebraska. Not necessarily, she's just weighing her options, right? She's saying, maybe I could live here, but I know it's going to be hard. But there's nothing that tells us she doesn't want to live here and she wants to move far away. She says the opposite. She says she likes it here. She likes working for them. So there's evidence to think that maybe she does want to stay here. She acts like Ambrosch because she adores him. Not necessarily. And at that point, we already moved past the Ambrosch thing. Ambrosch was her brother. She lives in a dream world. No, right? She's realistic. She knows that her life is going to be hard because she's an immigrant. She's not in this like dream world of like, oh, my life is great. Everything's going to be easy for me, blah, blah, blah. Thinks that she's the narrator's equal. Again, the opposite of that. She knows that things are going to be a lot harder on her and her brother because they're immigrants rather than the narrative. Knows that she must put survival above all else. This is the best answer here. It's a little bit hard to get here, but based on process of elimination, C is the best answer here. She must put survival above all else because she understands that her life is going to be plagued with difficulties because of her immigration situation. And she just wants to basically survive. She can't just act on things that she wants to do the way the narrator can. And then finally, in comparison to Antonia's life, the narrator's life is settled, right? The narrator's life is figured out. It's not going to be difficult. He or she is obviously living on this farm. They own all these cornfields. They're going to be okay. Versus Antonia, whose life is less settled. She's an immigrant. She depends on them. She has to work on the fields the rest of her life, et cetera, et cetera. All right, any questions? We just finished the last passage. Let's take like 5 minutes until 9:40. You guys can ask me questions about this passage or any last minute questions in general. And then we will do some notes until like 9:50. And then Miss Francis is going to join us at 9:50. Okay, so for time management, we're gonna do a whole like stress relief and strategy session on Tuesday. So I'll talk way more about that. But the thing with time management is you constantly need to be checking yourself on time and seeing how long you take per passage and managing your time. Does that make sense? So if you feel yourself staying for a long time on one passage, you have to force yourself to move on, even if you're not sure. If you're not sure of an answer choice and staying on it for 10 minutes isn't going to make you find the answer. So you have to be good at picking an answer choice and moving on. I've never seen on the Hunter test for you that you would have to pick more than one choice. Yeah, you can bring a watch. Yes, usually they have a timer up with a proctor and they constantly update it like every 10, 15 minutes. Yeah, you cannot bring digital watches. It has to be analog. And again, all of these like logistic questions we will discuss on we will discuss on Tuesday. Yeah, I'm pretty sure you cannot bring a digital watch. You can't bring anything that like they would think that you could like cheat. Does that make sense? You can't bring like an Apple Watch or something like that. But again, all of these things, like all these logistic things, we will discuss, and Miss Francis will give you like a whole list of things that are allowed, not allowed. So you don't have to like worry about this stuff. Let's focus on more like strategy questions or content questions. Like I said, I don't write the test, so it's hard for me to tell you guys exactly what the passages will be like. But these tests are good examples of the passages. So test 1 and test 2 is what you should be comfortable with, and what you should be expecting in terms of type of questions and type of passages. These are like really specific digital types of questions. Like I don't know how to answer them. It depends a lot on your proctor and whether they'll allow it or not, but okay, so what I'll do is I want to give you guys a list of strategies that we have talked about. Best guessing method is process of elimination. Okay, let's take some notes on strategies for 10 minutes, and then Miss Francis will join us. Okay, so one thing that I constantly do as I read is I monitor my own comprehension. So you have to know when you understand something and when you don't understand something. And once a flag goes off in your head that you're confused about something, that is going to make you able to reflect and like look for context clues or figure out, or knowing that you have a weakness somewhere is going to make you more comfortable with addressing that question. Does that make sense? So if you go back to something and you're like, okay, this is the part that I didn't understand, that's really important, rather than for you to not even know that you don't understand it and to think that you understand it. Does that make sense? So that's going to be strategy number 1. So number 1 is monitor comprehension. So you have to be aware of what you don't understand and then use appropriate strategies to resolve that comprehension problem. So what do I mean by this? Let's think about an example that we saw today. So remember that word environ that we saw today. So a good reader, a good test taker, when you get to that word environed, would realize, I don't know what this means. You don't just read it and keep going and think, I hope they don't ask me about it, especially because it's underlined. You would get to that point and you'd be like, I don't understand what this means. That's step 1. Monitoring your comprehension constantly as you're reading. A red flag goes in your head. I don't understand what this means, and it's underlined. I should figure it out now. Because by the time when you're reading and when you're like deep into analyzing the story, you're thinking about it, it, your brain is on. After you finish the passage and then you go to a question and then you're like, oh my God, they asked me about it. Now you're nervous about it. You go back, you're like, wait, this is the part that I didn't understand. There's so many more layers of nerves there. That's why it's really important to monitor your comprehension as you're reading and try to figure things out as you're reading before you even get to the part where they ask you. Okay, so you get to the part you don't understand. That's step one, realizing that you don't understand. Step two is now, how do I understand? And we talked about several strategies with this. First, you can think about the root word environment. And then you can think about the context clues of what are they talking about in this case. And then finally, once you do the question, you would replace all the answer choices with environment and try to figure out which word it is. So this is what I mean by this strategy is, number one, you have to monitor your comprehension. You have to know that you're confused about something. And then number two, then you apply strategies on how to fix the part that you're confused about. And then three is you successfully sort of answer the question. Okay, this next one is a little bit of a complicated word, but I like it. And it's a little bit trippy. It's metacognition. And what it literally translates to is thinking about thinking. And a good reader does this a lot. And I do this a lot as I talk out to you guys. A lot of the times what I'm doing is metacognition. So what you're doing is you are thinking about thinking. So before you read, you should think about your purpose, the purpose of the text. During reading, you monitor your understanding of the text. You adjust your reading speed to figure out the difficulty of the text and to fix any comprehension. And then after reading, you check out what you've read. So basically there's 3 steps to this. So before reading, during reading, and after reading. So before reading, you can figure things out like perspective right away. You can figure things out like genre right away. The stuff that we talked about yesterday. And I don't mean like before you even open the page, but just by looking at the article, you can see personal pronouns, right? You can see if they're using words like I, we, they. You can see the genre. You can see if there's going to be like a lot of dialogue and that this is going to be a story, and you see a lot of capitalizations. If it's a poem, we talked about this yesterday, you can see the shape of the poem. Does that make sense? So these are all of the things that you're thinking about before you even start reading, just by looking at the passage, what it looks like. If there's a title, if there's a blurb, all of that type of stuff falls into metacognition before reading edition. During reading is when you're monitoring your comprehension and you're kind of doing strategy number 1. And then after reading is you're sort of looking forward into the text. You're trying to figure out, like, you're monitoring your comprehension, you're trying to adjust your reading speed. If it's an easy passage, you should read faster, you should skim if you're absolutely understanding what's going on. If it's a really difficult passage, you monitor your thinking there. And then finally, after reading, you want to check the understanding. You want to quickly summarize in your head. You want to think, do I understand what I just read? Somebody's saying, should you read questions before you read the passage? I usually don't. The questions are usually chronological, so there's really no need for you to do that. And they're not usually, like, maybe on some later tests that you take in your life that are a little bit more difficult, like the SAT, it's a better strategy. For the Hunter test, I wouldn't recommend it, although some people do. If that's what you've been doing the whole time, I wouldn't suggest that you switch it now. But that's not something really that I think that you need to do to succeed. Number 3 will be organize your thoughts. So one way that you do this is you annotate, and we thought about this a lot. We talked about this a lot yesterday and today. You guys saw me annotate. So let's review how we annotate. Remember that you should have an annotation strategy. So you could have one line for one character, You could have 2 lines for another character. And what this does is it makes it really easy for you guys to go back into your passage and find exactly what you're talking about. 1 line for any main ideas, and it doesn't have to be exactly this. You can do like a star for any time there's figurative language. You have some sort of coding system for yourself. So you know exactly what it means and what you need to come back to. The other thing to think about is a lot of you guys do like a storyboard. You can just for each paragraph, yeah. So you can do like a timeline or a storyboard. Other strategies are things like Venn diagrams. If there's a comparison, I absolutely recommend that you do that to get all the main points across. If you want to talk about cause and effect, you could draft that out too in a diagram. So anything visual is helpful to a lot of students. So it's okay to be visual. It's comfortable to be visual. Another main strategy that we talked about is recognizing the structure. So we talked about that a lot yesterday. So we can put that as number 4. Number 5 will be look at connotations, which we talked about yesterday. So you guys have the notes for that. And then number 6, the huge one, is eliminate. And then here I'm going to say example, extreme answer choices, which we saw today. Any choice with everything, any choice with nothing is not going to be your answer. So between all of this, you guys should be comfortable enough to really do well on this test. The answer is in front of you. You just need to figure it out. Does that make sense? You just need to find the best answer there. So amongst all these strategies, even if you don't have a full comprehension of what you just read, you can still get to the right answer. Pick the one that's least like the other ones, okay? Connotation, absolutely. So that was something that we talked about yesterday. So whoever wasn't here yesterday, I can flip back to the notes from yesterday of connotation. So a connotation is a meaning of a word that's implied, that's separate from the actual meaning. So for example, if we look at the examples that I gave you guys, the word visitor has no connotation, right? By definition, it just means somebody that's in your house that doesn't live there. But if I wanted to make it positive, I could call that person a guest, because a guest by definition is still somebody in my house that doesn't live there, but a guest has this implication that I invited them in. It's a little bit more positive. Versus a word like intruder is still somebody in my house, obviously, that doesn't live there, but now that became way more negative. I'm implying that that person doesn't belong there. Does that make sense? So if you have a good understanding of the way connotations work, you can easily see if something is positive or negative. Yeah, that's a good example. You guys are absolutely allowed to write on this test. Yeah, you guys will have scrap paper and you'll have a bunch of space on the test. Don't worry about it. Scrap paper is not going to be a problem. Yeah, you cannot mark up the answer sheet, obviously, because that has to go through a scanner. Okay, let me flip back to the strategy page, yeah, in case you guys were taking notes. And again, don't worry about it. Just make sure that you email me and I will send you all the notes from today, okay? Yeah, no extra pages for the essay. But tomorrow we're going to talk a lot about the essay. We're going to do a full essay planning session, and I want to talk to you guys about imagery and figurative language because that's really important on the essay. I see Mrs. Kweller has joined us. Happy birthday. We can't hear you, France. Oh,
Have you unmute me?
yes.
Oh my God, this is so cute. Wait, can you make me co-host? I want to give everybody my good luck birthday wishes.
Yes.
Okay. Oh my God, this is so nice. Wait, let me go in my co-host. Oh, let me see if Goldie wants to join the birthday. Let me see where Goldie is. Goldie, come. Oh, here she is. Goldie, come here. Hold on, guys. Okay. Hold on. I have a surprise. Wait, am I co-host or no?
Yeah, I made you co-host.
Oh my God, it's Goldie. Goldie. Oh my goodness. Guys, you're never going to believe how old I am. This is like shocking. This is actually a shocking situation. Okay. Oh, this is so nice. Wait, am I co-host?
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's Goldie. Look, boogie, 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 boogie. Oh my God, this is so nice. I'm so happy. My birthday wish is for you to make me proud, study as much as you can, and work as hard as you can. And I hope that you're all future employees at Kweller Prep Tutoring and Educational Services. All right. I hope that my relationships with you are as great as they are with Olga. I'm very thankful, Olga, that I know you for so many years. And thank you for doing this 8 to 10 on a Sunday. Okay, and we're good. It's kind of weird, right? I can't believe it, guys. It's my birthday. Holy moly. We can sing happy birthday. We'll sing happy birthday to Goldie. You want to do that? Let's do it to Goldie because it's kind of her birthday too. I mean, I did get her on my birthday, so that could work too. Good. What do you think, guys? Is that funny? Let's do a quick happy birthday. We'll do a happy birthday to Goldie. Are you ready? Ready? We'll do it on 3. We'll sing happy birthday because it's technically her birthday also. But who saves who? I don't know. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday to you. Happy
Happy
birthday, dear Goldie. Happy birthday to you.
There we go, guys. Everyone. Okay. Thank you, guys. All right. Thanks, Olga. All right. Thank you, everyone. My birthday wish is for you to make me proud. I also want to remind you this is only a test. Do the best that you can. And I'm very proud. We're just learning. Thank you, everyone. So, Olga, just finish up. Give your final.
Yeah, I will.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, guys, make sure that we mute ourselves back because everybody on. Guys, make sure that everybody mutes themselves back because we all unmuted to sing happy birthday and it's echoing a little bit. That was so nice. I echo Ms. Queller's thoughts. Absolutely agree. Kweller Prep is the best environment for you guys to be here to continue your education and not only for the test, but just to develop a sort of mentorship and an ability to know how to study and how to keep bettering yourself and how to grow as a person. I think that's the most important part of your education. Trust me, I've had many years of schooling, so I have a lot of experience with this. It really is just a test, but it's a test that you guys are going to succeed on and do really great on. I know that for sure. I'm going to send everybody the notes that emails me. Again, I'm going to put my email in the chat. We have another session tomorrow where we're going to focus on the essay, and I would love it if you were all there. We did strategies today. We finished the full test. So you guys will have a fully annotated version of the reading comprehension exam. I recommend that you guys redo it and then try to match my annotations to yours, try to match my thought process to yours, and recognize what you're still weak on. That's what's most important in these last few days, is to figure out what last weaknesses we can fill in, okay? And then you guys still have a whole other practice test to work on, which I absolutely recommend that you do. I'm gonna put my email in the chat one more time for anybody that needs it. And if anybody has any last minute questions, I can stay on for the next 5-10 minutes to answer them. But don't worry because I'm absolutely gonna see you guys again tomorrow and Tuesday.
And everyone, remember, this is really important. What's today at 5 o'clock? Who can tell me what's today at 5 o'clock? Who can type it in the chat? What's today at 5? Very good. Do you see how we keep going? We keep going as a machine, right? Good. All right. I feel like we get better every year, right? Olga, like wine, we get better.
Yes.
I believe I'm 40. I'm 40 years old. How did this happen? That happened fast. You better watch out, Olga. You're next.
40 years young.
You're next, Olga. You're coming up. That's it. Oh my goodness. All right. I can't believe it. I'm 40. I feel like now I really have to act like an adult, right? For like an adult's age. Like you're like really an adult. I don't know. How about Goldie? Goldie, how old are you, Goldie? She doesn't know. She just wants to. She's happy. All right, everyone. Here's the dog. We're off. Okay. Thank you, Olga. Thank you for doing this. Okay.
Of course.
Do you miss Goldie?
I haven't seen Goldie for years.
I know, pre-pandemic. She
Yeah.
still looks good considering she's been through the pandemic. She looks good for her age and her skills. All right. Thanks, everybody. All right. Bye, everyone. Bye.
Okay, bye, everybody. I'm still
Goldie
here
is,
if anybody has any questions, but if you guys are good, you can go ahead and log off. And please don't forget to email me for the notes.
Aw, thank you, everyone. Thank you, guys. Okay. Bye. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Aw, Goldie is a mini labradoodle. Okay, that's her. Oh my God, you guys want to see something so cute? This is so cute. Hold on. Wait, let me switch the camera. Hold on. Goldie, are you laying down? Goldie's relaxing. Goldie, boo boo. Oh, she does. Goldie. Oh my God, I should probably join Extra Help Math now. Mo's going to want to wish me happy birthday. Goldie. Isn't this the most beautiful dog of a 40-year-old owner you've ever seen in your entire life? I have to like Google what to do because like 40 is such a real age. It is, right? I have to figure out what am I going to do? What am I going to do? To be completely honest, I have everything I want. I can't complain. I can't complain. I have my doggy. Yes. My students, my tutoring business, my family. I can't complain. Right, Goldie? 40's good. 40's good? 40's good to me. Yes, look at that. All right. Bye, everyone. Bye, guys.
Bye. If you guys have any questions, I'm still here. I'll keep it on for like the next 2 minutes. And then if nobody asks me anything, I'll just end it for everybody. But again, thanks for joining. I don't have the Zoom link. Let me try to see if I can find the Zoom link for the math. Hold on. I think it should be in this email, the Zoom link for the math. But I'm sure they're going to email it to you right before. On Tuesday, we were gonna do like a stress type of session and like last minute review. So that's the plan between Monday and Tuesday, but we can also like tomorrow, I'll ask you guys what you want me to do on Tuesday, because a whole 2 hours for just stress strategies, I feel like that's like a lot of time. So we can do whatever you guys want me to do on Tuesday. Maybe I'll do some math, even though Mo is doing math. I think that the consensus is you can bring a timer as long as it has no internet. How much percentage on the multiple choice to go to the essay round? I don't know. I don't think they release that type of information. That's better of a question for Miss Francis because she deals with like the grading portion and the admission portion. and I more deal with the teaching portion. Okay, any other questions? Also, like, it's okay if you guys don't ask me a question now. You can absolutely email me if a question comes up later on, or if you're unsure about something, or just like anything at all, feel free to email me, okay? I'm gonna go ahead and end the session now. Thank you guys so much for joining. I know 8 a.m. is early, and I will see you all tomorrow, okay? Bye.